thank everyone from UFO Research New South Wales for having us. You've got a splendid venue here, and of course for all of you for coming here, although I understand it was an AGM meeting. Essentially, I was, as described, the Secretary of UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Australia, and one of the things that we were concerned about in my past, everybody in this room probably might be associated with this group, but they're also, each individual has a history of their interest. And with myself, I'm an electronics engineer, I've got a software background, and what most people would probably consider that I'd be the most skeptically minded amongst our number, and my general appraisal is I'll handle the instruments and you guys tell me what's going on. But having said that, I guess it kind of grounds swallowing everything we've ever been told. As an electronics engineer, basically I suppose it comes like this. Once upon a time I was still studying at state school curriculum and so on, and I was starting to ask questions for which there didn't seem to be a reasonably good explanation, and I figured it was just because it wasn't in the curriculum that my teachers didn't know. And I was becoming a fan of Alan Landsberg productions and In Search Of, and listening to the dulcet tones of Leonard Nimoy telling me how not absolutely everything is all that explicable. Dom, you idiot. So I decided I should take a slightly wider view. Then, of course, von Daniken wrote his book, and things started to take off in 4 different directions, literally. This, as you've been told, Disclosure Australia project, it was the National Archives, and we would always been told, yes, but you know, people have dug through all this stuff before, and there's 6 folders, and it's all been done. I said, okay, that's terrific. But what we discovered was, just to give you a quick idea, if anybody doesn't know, if you went to a National Archival office and put the fist on the table and said, give me everything you've got on UFOs or UAPs or whatever you want to call them, it doesn't actually work that way. They did not reinvent the wheel. So people who were responsible for the register, say for instance, if the military or the Air Force said, we will take official reports, and they stopped in the mid-80s roughly, it doesn't mean to say that it was bannered under that logo. And reporting was not, or should I say, it was non-sequential. So just because somebody passes me a file and it has a number on it and a name, doesn't mean to say that the next thing about that topic will be the next thing on the shelf. It doesn't work that way. So we had to do a very large trawl, which is what took us years. And eventually, as was mentioned, we uncovered quite a lot of stuff. Compared to the 6 folios I was told existed, we ended up with, crikey, over 1,000, and then out of that, about 1,500 reports. And probably one of the interesting things was that we got to see them actually chatting backwards and forwards to each other. We got to see memos and, do you think we should really bother collecting the stuff anymore? And someone would reply, yes, it's a really good cover for doing something else. So the human remarks and the little squiggles in the margins are things that you don't get just by hearing an official release. And one of the things that happened was it broke in the newspaper. This guy's been digging all this stuff. In fact, it was a whole group of us. But of course, Keith, being smart, said, you do the interview. So he kept his face out of it because he'd done all that stuff before. And of course, this topic is what people refer to as a yo-yo topic. When there isn't a good political scandal on or something, you can always count on the journalists who bother amateur research investigation groups like ourselves for something controversial. But what that did was put my face in front of a lot of people who then started calling up. And we were looking at doing a website. We have for a long time lived in a world in which you can be made to believe anything. was the first line of that. It doesn't exist like that anymore, but it's one that I keep reminding myself of. If you have an event or an experience and it's controversial in the form of you can't prove it, not to a scientific laboratory technician, then the problem you have is to impart that information to someone else who will have to take it on the face. Basically, they either believe you or they don't. And all these expressions start coming out, don't tell me what I saw, I know what I saw. Even a parapsychologist found himself saying that to his colleagues over seeing a big cat. It wasn't an unusual creature, you understand, it was just, it wasn't supposed to be where he saw it. So he determined that when he was surveying large numbers of people, he decided, well, perhaps we're asking the wrong questions. This guy's name was Tony Jinks. Some of you may have either heard of him or you should look him up. We're going to have him present at our meeting later on this year. He was at the Paracon as well. And one of the things he did was, out of cross-sectional samples of people in the community, he determined that if we ask one set of them, say for instance, they had a cross-section of accountants, bankers, blue-collar workers, people from a group like this, whatever. And one of the questions was, do you believe in vampires? And just about all to the last said, well, no, we'll let it rot. The next cross-sectional group, and he did this interleaved across them all, didn't get that question. What they got was, do you believe that vampires once roamed the earth? And the answer they got, nearly most of the time, was, yeah, sure, that's possible. But they were technically being asked the same question. So how people perceive what you're telling them is half the problem. And it happened to me, and it did, and I'll talk about that later, is another one. The idea that there is no new knowledge is, well, it's almost reprehensible, so you'll never know everything. What do you think happened here?
Take it easy. You need to calm down.
Don't tell me to calm down. You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw.
I didn't need to know that you saw something that scared you.
Oh,
Well,
so...
that's not what you think it is.
So you know how I think, do you?
Take it easy. You're going to blow a blood vessel, something. And tell me, what did you see?
It's the brightest light ever. And it burned bad. Didn't make any real noise at all. Just some strange hum.
Okay, well that's a little weird.
A little?
Come on.
When was the last time it happened to anyone else? Let's face it, you just don't believe me, do you?
I believe you. You saw something. I'm sure it wasn't something normal.
Normal? You call this normal? This was something, some kind of flying object that burned me. Let's face it. What do you think that says?
Mum, I can only see where you've been rubbing your face and your arm. I certainly don't see a burn.
Why does it still hurt underneath?
Look, I'll drop you into the doctor's tomorrow morning. If there's anything wrong, he'll be able to point us into the right direction. Okay? Fair enough.
Reference from a dictionary, belief. Confidence in the truth or existence of something not immediately susceptible to rigorous proof. What you just saw was a reenactment that we filmed. We filmed the entire thing last year. We got the actors, direction, good film control and so on. What we wanted to do was to say to people, this is how it happens. And that the lady, Corinne Sennett, who's playing that part, the original woman in South Australia, I actually went out and interviewed. And the reason that I got to hear about her was because of this little bit of media turmoil that went on for a couple of weeks. So suddenly everybody came out in the woodwork and started to give me all this stuff. But what happened with her was she was going out to her family properties. She didn't live there anymore. Some of these very large acreage properties, they're actually leased out in their country getaways and so on. It was far enough remote that in the days when it happened, the actual event, and people close around knew about it, I figured Keith, who's been around for donkey's years in my eyes, and he won't like me for that, I said, well, you must have heard about this. It happened about 15 years ago. And he said, no, I don't know anything about it. Sometimes community conspiratorial silence, if you wish to call it something, is enough to keep something segregated from being public domain knowledge, because some country towns don't want to actually be known for that event. They've seen what's happened to other people. So even though everybody there knew this woman, knew that she was not prone to confabulation, and the first thing she did was phone her son when she got back that night, he had trouble with it in the first instance. But AREGs, what am I talking about? They're actually amateur research investigation groups, such as yourselves, such as me. Now, it's true, you can have such a group that's studying the reproductive habits of a nocturnal frog, but the learning institution that empowered them, credentialed them, and some of their work therefore will be taken more seriously and will find itself being spoken about until it's finally accepted. Whereas your peers are probably in this room. There aren't very many mainstream academic peers of some of the research stuff that you will ever do. That's not totally true, so I gave that other example. And basically that we get accused of these kinds of things, that we don't have a scientific endeavour. What does that mean? That the outcomes, the work is anything but real data, certainly not meaningful, and that they often involve or employ things that have variables. We'll get into that just afterwards. And last but not least, most theoretical work and even the witness testimonials are not accompanied by what they call hard evidence. So that whatever it was can't be a provable thing. So this woman that you just saw, that recreation, her biggest problem was not that it happened to her. She thought, you know, this is a terrible thing and whatnot. And I'll describe it to you. When she went out to that property, she was going out there late on a summer night to check to make sure that there was water available for the stock that was grazing on the pasture. They only had a wind-powered bore, and it hadn't blown a gale or even a breath of wind in a couple of days. When she got out there, the main house, and I've been there, just a short distance, you have to go up a hill. And you know there's rather large storage water tanks on rural or fringe rural properties, is embedded into the side of that hill. So of course it's this tall on one side and she's shorter than me, but round the other side, up the top, she can peer in with her torch and check the level. And as she did so, she could see the reflection of a torchlight, and 4 other lights turned on. And at first she thought they were in the bottom of the tank. And then she realised, even though she noticed nothing in the dark walking up, it was above her head. She could see 4 lights like these down lights, just like the corners of a square. And while she stood there and looked at it, a ring larger than the tank turned on. You know when something's so bright, you have to literally squint with your eyes like walking out of this dark into the sun. But she could actually feel it burning her. She protected herself and then legged it. And that's the story that she was trying to invoke throughout that episode, which we're still editing at the moment. But that's what that argument was about. And in the end, it's the argument that kills people. She had a relative who worked at a laboratory.
Oh, you gonna rub my nose in it or what?
Are you alone?
What, in this place? You've got to be kidding. Of course I'm alone.
No, I meant your son is here around.
No, he's been working on another property for a while. Look, I thought this was about the results you took.
It is, actually.
What am I looking at?
When I went to the lab with those samples, a sensor went off, telling you that I should be looking for something before doing anything else.
So that's what this is?
Yes, they're specific types of readings. And dangerous to have out in the open, technically.
I guess I'm not that technical.
They're radiation readings.
So what about me?
I'm not a medical doctor, Jess. Have you seen one?
Oh, yeah. But she didn't say anything about bad reports on anything. Maybe I should tell her the truth.
No, don't tell her about any of this. Do you understand?
Okay.
And never relate these details to anybody. Not while I'm still alive. Don't mention my name in connection with any of this. Are you listening to me?
All right, okay. What's got into you?
I just didn't expect this.
What, that it was true?
That it had raised so many alarm bells.
What does that mean?
Look, what this means is that either there was a known entity, you, irradiating vast tracts of farmland, illegally of course, or it was something unknown. Either way, it's dangerous for both of us if they think we know about it.
Who's they?
The powers that be.
So what are you going to do? With the samples, I mean.
Same as I'm doing with this. I buried them.
Well, aren't you going to stay for a while?
Today, I was never here.
That guy came over and said, I'll take some samples, I'll take it to the lab and I'll blow all your fears away. So the argument was there was nothing to it. By the time he got back, he wasn't arguing about the point anymore. He was determined that she shouldn't tell anybody. Not because there was a belief problem anymore. He'd got past that. Now he was scared. Even I have these I want to believe things from years ago. I think I'm even wearing one around my neck. But we went out and got a poster that said, I believe. I'm surprised it didn't say already at the end of it. But it's difficult to impart that to other people. Then there's such a thing as we know what we can afford to know. That person you were just listening to was concerned not because it was a physical problem, but because he didn't know if it was safe for people to know what they knew at the time. What I can tell you is that at the end of that episode, I tried, in reality, going back, some 13 years or so, when I'd last spoken to her, I phoned her up again. Because I'd been out there and I didn't want to, it was a long travel. And I said, look, is there any way, I know you won't tell me his name, but I mean, you know, contact him, he might want to talk to me after all these years. And she said, well, he can't. I said, why? She said, because he's dead. And that representation of him in there is not a young version. That's pretty much what his age was. He was in his mid to late 30s at the time, and within a couple of years he was gone. So, I don't mean to scare anybody, but he was in a kind of a unique position. Oh, that's interesting. I've got a blank. Now, how about personal things? I can analyse, I can be analytical, and I was very disappointed to find out that, is it this one? Yep. I went to say it the last time I presented this at Paragon, I said, well, you can see this a few years ago because and I realised that I had no more hair on my head then than I do now, but it was a few years ago, and you can see all this armada of crud that I've got in front of me. We were invited by the licensee of this really over a century-year-old place to go and investigate because his staff and even himself, I mean, they'd become aware that there was something almost like a nuance as opposed to being something scary, that everybody's seen something weird. So we went out there, we set the whole place up, and what I wanted you to be aware of is the following. Ground floor, ordinary publican place, snooker table, all that kind of stuff. First story, that was a balcony. They blocked it in, and you can see those windows just behind them, and turned it into a dormitory for stayaways. This is on the way out to Canberra. And you can see that little window at the top there. They even converted the attic space, if you don't mind, and there's a couple of beds up there too. And going smack up the middle is one of the oldest seated staircases in your life. So what I want you to understand is this. In order to access this balcony, from the stairwell, you had to go through the room that used to look out onto it. If you had upper story rooms and you'd step out onto the balcony, that was the little room that we were setting all this gear up in. And I would have the light on for a number of reasons, and I would monitor equipment that we'd set up throughout this building. And because the licensee had had such results, one of the things that he had the first time around, he was there. And the group had tried to, however you want to call it, channel information, etc. And one of the things that they were discovering and telling this person, because we brought a medium with us, was that he should check the building and the way it was constructed over his snooker table, that they had a vision of fire. And me being skeptical said, yeah, well, you know, it's probably ropey old wiring, who knows? But he took it seriously. So the next morning, he calls the electrician, who comes to give the place an inspection, because he was due for one anyway. Not only was the bit above the snooker table bad, it was actually sparking when they removed the panels with the lights on, and that, because you know how you have those drop lamps over the top of it? You could see where it was actually burning the trussing. So he was now 100% convinced. We got asked back again. I said, yes, I didn't really get much on this gear. I was setting up in the exact same place. This time, they were going to give us the place completely to ourselves, empty, everyone's gone, lock us in, all that kind of stuff. In fact, I think I remember asking for it in more ways than one. And the strangest thing that happened didn't happen during all this monitoring. What did it for me out of these two visits was the following. I had just finished, because the staff were upstairs getting all their stuff, I set up downstairs first, then I went up the top second, obviously, so I've got it to myself. One of the things I don't know if you can see it on there. Oh yeah. There's a laptop, there's various screens, half of it's not even in that shop. But a camera I put up in the attic space, last of all, because I figured everyone's gone. You can never turn off the exit signs. It's illegal. So even if you had all the lights off, you could see where you're going in case of an evacuation. Now, I was down just in the room next door to that shop there, and Frank, who was our long-haul driver, was with me, and I was just about ready to go. So I got on the radio and told the group downstairs, okay, we're just about ready to start. And in a really old place, with standard height ceilings, with mouldings and drop lamps and so on, if somebody is walking around upstairs, not only can you hear it straight through the roof, but you can actually see the ceiling move. You can see the light fitting jiggle. And something that I didn't realise was on the monitoring that I had, the sound from that camera upstairs was coming out there. So I could really hear it easily. I said, someone's gone back upstairs and get some gear. And Frank spun around to look at the monitor that was covering that camera. And I pushed the laptop closed in front of me so I could see it too, and it stopped. So now I'm sort of seeing red, because I figure some loony on the staff has raced upstairs to get something at the end, tripped over my camera lead, and was, I have to go up and do it all again. So we went running up the staircase. Now the staircase is the only way up. It's right next to us, and it makes a racket. I'm sure a mouse couldn't get up there quietly. So by the time we ran up, I had to get on the radio and say, it's okay, it's just us. We're just rushing up to kick this guy out. And there was nobody there. I said, oh, they're probably in one end of the... So we walked around, went in different directions, and then we stopped doing that and went around together, because it's a rule. And there's just nobody here. And it never once occurred to me that there wouldn't be anybody there as far as I was concerned. I was logically thinking this thing through. Where did this guy go? I even ended up dropping my shoulders and said, there's nobody here. And there was a closet right next to me. And I did the proverbial slowly move the hand to the counter, and I ripped the door open. And I said, there's nobody here. It wouldn't go in. And then Frank reminded me, he said, what about the camera? Oh yeah, I forgot. It's just off to one side, so it's out of that little exit halo. The point being, if anyone was walking around during our evening, they wouldn't trip over it. And it was exactly the way I left it. It's charged by an SLA battery, those bricks that go in alarm boxes and so on, 12 volt. It lasts all night. It's new, but it's not brand new. I've cycled it a couple of times, so I know it works fine. It's not a lemon. And because I just set it up, and I'm an engineer, I've got my multimeter in my pocket, so I go over and measure it. 8.23 volts. If you've ever had a flat battery in the morning, I mean flat, you left the light on or whatever, that's about 10.5, dead flat. For it to go all the way down there, it'd be like 10.01. I measured them all and logged it. 50 minutes later, flat as a tack. So we had to get on the radio and say, okay, we've lost camera number 3, and all this lot downstairs cheered because they thought, this is great, this is what we're looking for. And more than that, they thought it was terrific because it happened to me. I didn't see anything. I haven't got a recording of video that shows something. What I have, when something browns out, when it's video and it's losing power, it starts getting snowy. Then it gradually gets worse and worse and worse until it stops. This didn't. It had herringbone lines. Have you ever seen them on a screen? Do you know what herringbone lines come from? What would be your first guess? Interference. Yes. And then it stopped. Not the interference, I mean the whole thing stopped. I got nothing to prove it. I got nothing to make somebody believe what I've just told you. But those earlier remarks of it happened to me and don't tell me what I saw, well I didn't see anything. But I saw the ceiling move and I know what the building's like. I spent the next day trying to find where he got out. And to this day I haven't succeeded, that's all I can say. So, here's a problem. What I might do is go forward one. This is what the academia wants you to do. Now, I suppose what I could say is, we do this bit, we can even do that bit. We might even be able to make predictions, and you hear a lot of them, but this is very difficult. So therefore, as far as the scientific community is concerned, we can't do this phrase. It's a very overused phrase by a lot of people, but for good reasons. So if you said, well, we can run around and do all this stuff just like I told you, but no one's really paying that much attention, that's something that people debate me about a lot. They say, no, I think you're being watched. I think there are a number of serious places. Like if I said to you that there is an official house of investigating paranormal's weirdness, would you agree? Would you think that one must exist, they just don't advertise the fact? Would you think that the cheapest way is for amateur research investigation groups to do all the legwork and they'll just pay attention to the stuff that we upload on the web? And then go and try it out for themselves at huge cost that nobody knows about. So that's a reasonable undertow. But also, you spend half your life trying not to get taken twice. So when you walk up to a total stranger at the platform, the bus stop or wherever and say, mate, you know what time the next service comes past? And they say, oh, it's about 10 minutes. And you believe them. It never even occurred to you that they might be pulling your leg. But if a total stranger reports to our society, this is what happened to me on the night of, and I read this whole account, I will always try and go out and see them. That lady that was recreating that part, I actually went out, it took hours to get there. I drove out, I saw the place. This is matching with everything that she's told me. There's a electric powered bore mill, but she could show me a photograph of when it was wind powered, and there's the tank, and there's where the grass never grew, and so on. But even that sometimes is not enough for people. But the one thing that you will get out of it, is at some point during their account, the belief system that they used to hold changed. And you can tell when that was. And even I wasn't silly enough to think that happened around every street corner. Now, we, as we've talked about, exist from little or no money to spending everything you've got in the pursuit of a knowledge, the outcomes of which won't profit you bugger all. So what is it that you do, or that I do, or anybody involved in research does, that annoys the hell out of mainstream studies? And methods and output sometimes aren't up to scratch. Okay, that's fair enough, but one of the reasons would be because you're not dealing with the same classical Newtonian physics. If I were to say to you that your world of experience, that which you rely upon certainties, otherwise you would never venture a single thing, are those things that match to your experiences. If you say, every time I do this with an egg, it breaks, the old Professor Sumner Miller thing, and every time they do this, this is the outcome, that's our classical Newtonian physics world. And yet, most people in this room would at least heard of, if not fallen asleep listening to, quantum physics or mechanics. What happened was people decided that if they wanted to learn more about elementary matter, they would have to not only forget some of these classic rules, but they would have to actually break them or wipe the table and start again. These were notable individuals, and yet they had a really hard time getting anybody to accept. Now it's reasonably acceptable. So what they had to do was forget, if not unlearn, what they thought must be the truth, like me thinking that there was some guy running around up top. And it took me ages to get over that. Not that I've ever really gotten over it. So Eric's tread where others do not dare, but as long as your data is significant, why is anybody ignoring it? What about this?
You can see what you're doing.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome.
So who knows a good ghost story, huh? Come on, you must know heaps.
This family was holidaying just over the Queensland border in about 1963.
I thought you said there weren't supposed to be any more trains coming tonight. How are we all supposed to sleep?
Well, there won't be, according to the locals in town. Last train's at 7:30 apparently, freight train.
Dad, are we going to have a party on Brian's birthday?
Well, we're out in the middle of nowhere, but we've always made a fuss. It's no different this time. Go and help him over with the dishes, alright?
Hey, Dad, what's that bright star?
I don't know. Could be one of the planets, I reckon.
Really? Which one?
Not too sure, but it wouldn't be Mars. It's not red enough.
Do you think Martians are real?
You've been reading those annuals too often. I'd be in two minds about getting you a new one. Still, your brother's probably the next best thing. Sure would explain a lot.
What's that?
Bugger it. Mungrel said there weren't any trains after 7:30.
Does the lane go up from here?
No, it may be an illusion. Looks as though it's up higher though, doesn't it? What the hell is that? It's not moving.
What are you two looking at? I hope it's not one of those trains that aren't supposed to be coming.
It's a light, but it's not on the ground. Why has it stopped?
It could be one of those helicopters or something.
I've only ever seen one of those, so why can't I hear it?
It's coming closer now.
Now what? What do you think it is?
I don't know. That's the part that bothers me. Get the kids in the tent.
Why?
Don't argue with me, just do it. I got a very bad feeling about this.
Laurie, what the hell is that?
Get out of it, you mongrels! Get inside.
Gun?
What was that?
It's nothing. It's nothing for you to worry about.
I've got a bump on my head. Let's have a look.
It's just a little one. Okay, I'll clean it up and put you to bed. And I don't want to hear another word.
Don't worry about it, Chris.
I would appreciate if you didn't ask me that anymore. It was nothing.
What was that all about?
What do you think? They want to know what all the commotion was about last night, and I don't know what I'm supposed to tell Chris.
I don't think I can help you out with that this time around. You saw this thing, what it did, where it went. There's something wrong with the trees.
What?
The tree tops have wilted.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Isn't that where that thing was last night?
That's what I was talking about. I reckon I'll get up there and take a look.
Don't be ridiculous. You'll break a branch long before you get that far.
Fine, I'll get the other slide up there.
No, you won't. And for what? So you can be sure you're not losing your mind? You'd
course
rather
not.
lose one of your kids instead?
I'll just give him a boost so he can reach.
Better know what you're doing.
Don't I always? Brian, get out here!
Come on, listen to what your father says.
Now what?
Come on, it'll be okay.
What I want you to do, drag some of those branches down, the ones that are drooping. See them?
Give me a boost.
1, 2, 3. There you are. What'd I tell you?
Yeah, all right. You be careful up there, Brian. Watch what you're doing.
Trishy's done this more times than you care to think about.
Look out below! Truth, have a look at these.
Well, no wonder they look strange from down here. Virtually turned into bark.
Mum, we've seen these before.
Yeah, I think you're right.
What are you talking about?
The bushfire near our way.
You remember Laurie? Threatened the house? Didn't burn every bush in the place, but it sure dried them all out.
Yeah, we didn't have a bushfire last night. It's not like one I've ever seen before.
Dad, you saw the thing too.
There's nothing for you to worry about.
Hey, Chris, light up!
We're gonna have to think of something better to say.
Well, if you got any suggestions, I'd like to hear them.
What do you want?
What's the matter?
According to them, nothing.
What did they tell you? What are you doing? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's
What is it? What is it? Where are we? Where am I? What is this? Leave me alone. What do you want? To give without fear. What on earth was that? Let's just forget
In all of these things that we're showing you in recreations, which do you think was the person who told us all about it? When a person says it happened like this, I'll tell you about it. That's one thing. When you can look at them and say, okay, there's an aha moment, I can see where you were convinced of something and now you're just telling me. But there's still the belief factor. Your friends sometimes are polarized and are divided into people who do and do not believe you, and it will not stop with your family. Even after that woman at the beginning told her son, eventually he took it on. But was that just because it was his mum? People occasionally say, if I could put this in a court, I'm pretty sure I've got the eyewitness testimony, I've got a piece of hard evidence which is bewildering scientists. Surely it's as admissible as anything else. Surely people, a jury, the people, you lot, would have to say this is true. So I said, okay, well if that's the case, let's look at it under that guise. So I wrote a book just recently on that. But one of those things was a very strange encounter indeed. In all this digging through the archival, trawling and all that stuff, I'd always heard these rumours that, well, in SA you've got the Woomera testing range, the rocket range. This is a place where people point cameras at the sky, and as we were entering nuclear testing in ages, it's often been an argument that's when we attracted a lot of outside our atmosphere attention. You said, okay, so then surely these people must have caught something. You may have seen a program on SBS about that very scenario in the United States at White Sands. They had an aircraft standing by. It happened enough that didn't log a flight plan. The film wasn't developed in a normal way. They just given to the pilot and then took off. And that program showed you the people who used to actually operate cameras. Believe it or not, that went to air as I was coming back from New South Wales when I found out that this story had gone in the newspaper. And when I watched the show, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually dig up some stuff from our own test centre? And I got the phone call from the archives that they'd found a file that we were looking for, and it was exactly about that. So when people have testimony from an eyewitness and they can actually pick out a type, if not a perspective, from an array, you would think that would be as good evidence as anybody's ever had. I got a phone call from that person, that's her last security pass, and that was her job. She tracked the skies, she was using an optical instrument, and her name was Elizabeth. She operated something called a contravas theodolite. It was a camera. There's Baker nuns, there are all types of things. You've often seen them during the Apollo launches. They'd have those whopping great telescopes on a gun turret. And she used to operate something of that manner, because if you were testing downrange bloodhounds or missiles in military and destructive purposes, the only thing you had left was a bunch of rubble. And the film of what happened, so scientists were very interested. And it wasn't the only thing that happened when she did have an event that way. But just to give you an idea, that is my witness on the left, although she was 17 when I interviewed her. On the right is her good mate, and you'll notice for the Women's Day, they were even wearing pumps. But that wouldn't have been the general course of things back in those days. A couple of things happen. I'll go back just so you can see that. She was there for quite some time, between 56 and 60. And she specialised in tracking of early satellites, rocket trials, downrange missiles and bomb trials. The folder that we found when we were trialling was actually something that included some of the weirdest Anglo-Australian relationship tests that they were doing. They were doing one with a Canberra bomber once, and they noticed something else was watching it. It appeared on their radar tracks. The scientist from England apparently dropped his binoculars, blinked, and they had another look, and he could still see it, but he couldn't pick it up with his eye. This woman was filming, and sometime in 1957, a sequence of events took place that completely mystified her right to this day. I'll just track with my notes. During a particular night trial, so they set the cameras up during the day so it's pointed at the right time, they were going to track a downrange missile, so it would launch and then start heading over. A strange plate or a disc-like object slowly moves into her field of view. Now, you have to remember, this little steering wheel that they've each got, one was for azimuth or left-right, and the other one was to track altitude, and each person would do their job. This prime instrument would pick eyes out of kangaroos a few kilometres away. This is what they're looking into here, is a parallel device. You can see the end of it like a small spotoscope, so that then they can track. So, what would you expect a person to do if they were trying to report something? They would get a cup, draw around it and say, this is what I saw. Without telling this person, the file I found at the archives contained exactly those things, and they all described a similar circumstance. In fact, the paraphernalia or the chat between their superiors was not what a load of rubbish or this is too sensitive, etc. What they were annoyed about was that on a secret test site, the reports of the strangeness were actually getting out. They were more concerned about that than anything else. So, I guess basically what I need to do is tell you what happened. Now, it moved into the camera frame and her view was provided by the things that's shown there. They were a full complement, so there would be 4 cameras like this, making up a minimum of 8 operators who would have seen and filmed what happened. But something very strange occurred after that. This object then took off out of the left frame and she never saw it again. Now, I lived at a place in Elizabeth, and just across from there was something referred to as a long-range weapon research establishment, and it was alive and well back in those days. So what would happen is you would take the film out, write the test number on it. It was black boxed, it wasn't developed, black bagged and sent down to Adelaide. 2 days later, on this particular occasion, this woman was rounded up, taken into HQ, walked into a room with a desk and 3 chairs. One was for her, and on the other side of the desk were 2 suits. They were not in uniform. I said, did they have an American accent? He said, no, just seemed like the average English goon. She referred to them as old because they looked like they'd be about 40. And she was like in her early 20s, so I got that straight. That sounds about right. And all they did, without introducing who they were, nobody introduced anyone. They just said, you see that canister on the table? Did you do this trial? She said, well, yeah, I can recognize my handwriting. I can see that. I think I even pretty much remember the number. 2 days, that's the turnaround time to send the can down, somebody to develop it, look at it with a scientist, put the lid on it, and then head out. And they said, so you took this trial? Yes. We're not to tell anybody about what you saw on this trial. She said, but we're not allowed to anyway. Why would you bother coming out to tell me about something we never do? And he re-emphasized, said, no, you cannot talk about it with your base colleagues. You cannot tell your mother. You cannot talk to this person or that person. Which he found a bit strange, because people on base at least would talk to, especially if something went wrong or stuffed up, they'd have a good laugh. We're talking about someone who's skinny dipped in the water tower. And the guys found out that they did this, so they turned one of the cameras one day and started it for a few seconds and stopped it and then put it back where it was. So of course what happened, they filmed the trial, sent the film down, and they all got into trouble. Because they closed the curtains and all these bigwigs are sitting there to watch this rocket test, and the first few seconds of these women swimming. So, not a shrinking violet, had lots of things to say, but this wasn't the only thing that happened. Shortly after all of this, her and her fiancé were returning to base. And there was something about the first one which I haven't told you. As she was returning to base with her fiancé, it was at night. They were approaching the security gate when the whole sky flashed green. I don't know if you've ever heard people say it suddenly flashed bright for a split second, like somebody had the biggest flash camera in the world. But it was so bright that he lost his night vision, and he was braking and he ended up in the dirt on the left. And the security guard came racing out and said, what was all that? And they said, well, we don't know. Her original observation through that camera, this plate light thing, how is it that you could see this? And she said, because it had a little green glow on the top. And that's the exact phrase she used. You should remember the phrase green glow and look it up. And you will make your own minds about, I'm not prepared to say anything about that. But what about different circumstance? This couple was on their way home from a visit.
No speeding required. As you say, just a short journey.
Trust you to be the law-abiding citizen. It's nearly midnight on one of the quietest roads in the state. Everyone I know would bolt along here but you. Maybe you were right about that wearing out thing after all.
Oh, God. What was that?
What?
What was the edge of the road like?
What?
The edge of the road.
How the hell should I know? Just watch out for that ditch!
What the hell?
Who's gonna know we're even here?
Just Cairo, only today.
How long are we gonna be stuck here?
Battery's fine. Lead it perfect.
How the hell are we gonna get home?
Could be hours before anyone comes by. The hell am I gonna do now?
Thank God for that. I thought we were well and truly done for.
You're not the only one. Still, I can't see how that can happen.
Perhaps water got in somewhere?
I don't think so. I only checked this thing over this morning.
And that means what? You couldn't make a mistake.
Well, yeah, anything's possible, but it's not like I even opened the bonnet and did anything.
For once. No, you don't. We're leaving. We're nearly home.
Well, I guess it is getting late, and I'm just glad we're not stuck here, but I want to check this thing out tomorrow.
Well, at least we got home in one piece.
right now I've got a date with a certain auto electrician, and I can't wait to hear what he's going to say about this one.
Can you flip the kettle in, please? Oh, at least the cats aren't hounding me the minute we get in.
Unusual for them, even at this hour.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I had to get up early this morning, so looking forward to a lay-in. At this rate, we'll be in bed by...
Stephen, has the clock stopped?
Well, obviously car wasn't the only thing that stopped today.
Stephen, it's 3 a.m. How can that be?
Can't be. We left at 11:30. It can't be.
At the third stroke, the time will be 3:02 precisely.
Hey Nat, it's me. Yeah, I know, don't worry about that. Look, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. We left your guys' house about 11:30 last night, didn't we? Yeah, I thought so.
Well?
Nothing wrong with it. As far as he's concerned, couldn't happen the way we described in any case.
That's enough for me.
Meaning?
Come on, Stephen. You know what must have happened. We lost 3 hours, and it happened on a road when, for no reason at all, our car stopped. And apparently so did everything else.
Well, yeah, but how on earth can time move on without us?
Come on, let's go home. The long way.
Been together for 4 or 5 years, and the woman sitting next to you gets up one day and says, I want to tell you something about what happened to me. Instead of, reading out the reports from last month, she told you what happened to her X amount of years ago, and that was the story. And we all looked at each other and thought, why didn't she tell us about that? Because we tell the public, hey, no ridicule, no judgment, you can just come and see us and everyone will listen. And after all this time, they haven't bothered trying to get regressed. They weren't even aware of what happened in the first instance, but what she can tell me is that every now and then there's a sound, a sight, an odour, and there's a slice that she gets back from that time that went. And she's quite content that it's rather like growing old. You really don't want to do that in a hurry. She'd rather a natural decline, if you like, in mystery and learning more than trying to force the issue and risking what people call post-hypnotic suggestion and so on. She's quite content about that. So I know which one it was who told me. The stupid thing is, they'd known me for years. That woman was involved in the trawl at the National Archives, and I still didn't know what had happened to her. So what is it about disbelief that she was more bothered about? What I can say to you is that in order to change your ideas, you need to hear enough of it. So if the premise of argument has always been, okay, I don't have enough proof to prove it to everybody beyond doubt, that's why we still debate it, that's why we still collect all this stuff. If you collect everything that everybody ever tells you, and we look at everything, not just UFO reports, of course there's going to be a kind of signal to noise ratio where in the modern day there's more explanations, you get down to the last 5 out of 100, and so on. Well, how come just in the modern period there's 1,500 reports and they're all saying the same stuff? So part of the premise of argument is the weight of numbers. If we're all losing it, how come it's been going on for not just tens of years or hundreds of years, probably more than that? One of the things that we used to delight in doing a lot was going to, not the, let's say for instance, Maitland Jail, and there's a ghost tour there and so on. We went to some joint that nobody had paid much attention to, and essentially we would not make up our own rules, but we had to be careful about what rules of evidence that we would follow. This was two guys who simply went out night fishing like they always did.
They rowing, or have they just got a real quiet motor?
Actually, I don't think that's a boat at all.
It's be a dinghy or something, though, or maybe a mast light in the sky. Whoa! Did you just see it?
Yeah, it's all right, mate, yeah.
What do you think it is?
I haven't got the faintest idea, but I'm sure I don't like it.
Hey, let's get a closer look.
No way, that thing is weird.
Nah, I'm weird. That is incredible. Man. It just moved again. Did you see how fast that was? This is incredible.
I have no idea what it is.
Nor do I, dude. Oh, watch it. Oh,
You better get out of here, mate.
dude.
Let's get out of here. That's just too weak, man.
Big guys up. That's all good, man.
That was weird, that thing.
I reckon, eh? Jesus. Oh. Shit, dude. It's heading slow. What's going on?
What's going on? What's going on with the boat?
Rat, man, dude, this is not cool.
She won't go. The boat won't go, mate.
Look, I'll break out the oar, man. I can row faster than this.
Well, the big problem was their mobile phones weren't working.
Not at all. Wasn't just a signal problem.
Not sure. They were useless. And another thing, their watches weren't working either.
So that's why the time confusion?
Yep. From that moment on, they couldn't be sure about the time at all.
It won't go. It won't go again.
Hey, it's okay. It's gone.
Are you sure? I wasn't looking back.
Yeah, dude. No, it's all cool. God, that was close. I can't see anymore. It's rushed off.
Well, wherever it's gone, it can stay there.
Yeah. I don't get it. Hey, have you seen anything like this before, mate? Right. Take we're not going fishing anymore, then.
I'm just glad it's gone. I can't wait to get home.
Yeah, fair enough.
You can think which one of those guys actually told us what happened. That was somewhere known as Cowan Creek, you know, along the Hawkesbury River system. People go and put the boat in, they spend X amount of time, and if they drift along until they get lucky, literally, with fish, some of them would end up in that particular area. We never had any other reports, and they used a particular term. They said zigzag. When this thing appeared, it zigzagged as it flashed across, and when it chased them, the boat stopped. The closer it got. When it went away, the boat would start. We've had a sighting ourselves where the camera wouldn't work when it was close to, but when it got further away, without touching anything, the camera burst into life simply because the battery stopped or it went flat. I could hear sound because it's only FM sound and there's a couple of volts, but the video had stopped. I'm quite sure there are a number of cases that are pitted with these kinds of remarks, or the torch wouldn't work, and then when it left me, the torch came back again. And yet, that battery that happened to me in that day, I can't use it anymore. It works, but it's not reliable. It's stuffed, quite simply. Then you have this question of time. Then there's this question of vehicle interference cases. That's probably one that you're used to, and it's like an entity unto itself. We've got the car situation where the car appeared to suddenly stop, but then reignite itself. The guy tried to key, nothing happened, and then he took his hand away, and the car started up. But those two lost all that time. These two were not sure of the time, because their mobiles stopped, their watches had stopped, the mobiles were useless, and by the time they got back, it had been hours. And they said, well, it couldn't be, but they knew it was. You could see the dawn breaking, they checked with the landing area, they knew what the time was, but they couldn't reconcile that with what had happened. Most people have problematic circumstance with believing you as much as you might have with believing the circumstance yourself. Then we get asked to go to places, probe, record, looking for answers to this what's behind the veil thing. So we don't just look at the UFO phenomenon and try and recreate that. We often recreate cases where people have told us some really strange and bizarre things. I guess that last one was one of them. It just sounds more of a UFO encounter. So we presented more of those to you than anything else. We found a place, as I said to you before, that wasn't well known. In fact, nobody really knew that much about it. We had heard something from the groundskeeper, so I said, fine, can we get in there? And this, if you like, is a basic ideology of how we used to go about those things. And we were lucky because we wanted to do a music experiment. And what we did was play something, you know, in places of diseases of consumption. Some of those people were not well cared for, and sometimes the only way you would leave is at the small door at the back. It's true those kinds of institutions and asylums and all the rest of it have changed, but some of them still exist. And physically, we wanted to play music from that era, a bit later on and a bit later on, just an experiment. I said, okay, fine, if all this residual energy is true, surely it would peak when you mentioned one thing or played one thing compared to something else. You remember that wheel where there was no such thing as experimentation? We thought we can think of something. And then at the end of this clip, what you'll find is that group, one of our number, Kelly, she actually is we're all a fan, she went along and saw them, and it turns out they're interested in all this stuff as well. And they granted us license to use some of their music. And so I'm ending this presentation with this last clip. And, oh, there goes the vision. That's all right, I've got it back in. Will it auto? No, not yet. I won't start the clip yet. Do you want to just recycle me? So I'll tell you about it. In a number of these places, people would be housed for either contractual diseases, as I said before, disease of consumption, and things that you would have to be isolated for. They weren't very nice. We'd always heard stories of how bad things are or could get, but we'd never really actually visited one of them and tried out this kind of stuff. So that's what we were doing there. And all this does is show to you what we do, how we would go about it, how we would make someone consider the realm, what was the possibilities versus what was happening, what we've been told about, and what could we do to try and prove any of it. Here we go. That's right. I'll catch up to it. Yay! So I'd like to thank you for all your attention. I know some of this stuff, because it's visual, is okay, but essentially when I'm talking about factual things or trying to argue logic, it can get a bit bogged down. All I'm really interested in is this kind of work now, and I'm grateful for everybody who came here today. I hope you enjoyed this.
After going through and assessing all the areas that we were able to get access to, I then went for a bit of a walk around. Because we'd been there before, there were certain rooms that were appealing the last time, so I tend to head to those same rooms to see if I get that general feeling again as what I did the last time. So that just makes it easier of the night when we're setting up, that we've got particular rooms of interest that we can target first and then head to the bigger areas later on.
How many of you have ever heard of things like baseline readings, finding how electrically quiet the place is and so on? Then they went back.
Yeah, it was the one, next one down, and I want to cross. If you start getting something, give me a count. Okay,
Maybe you can get better. What we did was we argued, well, then surely you could have a conversation and be able to physically see it on something. But I didn't actually do it.
Stop moving.
Look at that.
This is called a control.
No. Are you directly where you were?
Well, I was about here.
You would have seen his
Can
light.
you see my light?
Oh, look, it went again then.
What?
It just spiked again.
Can you just confirm that that was you standing the other side of the door, the man that I saw the other side of the door?
Yeah.
Can you really, like, move it high? Well, that's probably good because I know it's hard. Somebody else with us now.
Can someone say
Yes.
hello? Yeah,
Hello.
off the charts.
That's
Just
great.
for reference,
Keep moving it right over to the right if you
camera and
can.
light and everything is held.
Go as high as you can go. Oh, well done.
Close to each other.
Thank you. We're going to be working with you tonight. You're a really strong
It
spirit.
cannot do that. It cannot run at full scale deflection. That's on a 0 to 100 milligauss, which is quite high.
Okay, so are you happy for us to be here? If you are, can you move the needle right over to the right?
Thank you.
Give it a good go if you're happy for us to be here. If you don't want us... Oh, thank you very much. That's great. We're going to get a board out later, so you're more than welcome to join us on the board and communicate with us. I would love to know your name. Are you happy to come on the board later? Oh, thank you. That's excellent. This is so good for our research. I really, really appreciate your efforts. Like I was saying before, you obviously would have heard me. This is all just for research, just to prove these skeptics that spirits still live on. And by you moving it right to the right, you're acknowledging with me that you agree.
And just for the record, it's really quiet. No electrical at all.
Do you normally stay in this end of the hospital or do you follow around? If you stay in this ward, oh okay, so you're down this end, okay. So if we were to come back later on in one of these rooms, we're going to do a board in one of these rooms, you would happy to help us out? If you were happy to help us out, can you move it right over? Yes. Oh, thank you so much. What we would also like, I mean, I know this is asking a lot, but we're here as your friends. When we're going to be asking questions, we're going to do a music challenge. Now, the music is going to be current music, but we're really excited because we've got a band that's allowed us to use one of their songs. We decided to do a music experiment where we chose a few different music tracks from different eras, but the main piece that I was interested in was a current track,
I didn't get a release from everyone,
which was released in the last couple of years, which I thought might get some sort of reaction from the spirits in the hospital, as they would last be used to listening to early 1900, late 1900 style of music.
Okay, this is me again, not having anything to do with the room where all these guys are. I'm out in a control room, and you can hear them. Even I knew there was someone outside the building, which is why I started running around with the camera. I know the sound. I know the sound is a bit low in here. So some of that chat is the fact that I don't do this, but what they were going through here is determining that there was somebody who wanted to join them, like coming in down the hall, which is where I'm running that camera, couldn't see a thing. This was an experiment where I filmed the same route they were talking about, and I said, okay, well, if you can see it, why can't I see it? Then I ran a grid mask and tried to run a mask between the two to see if I could digitally tell that there was a difference between the two images.
Yeah, because the noise that I can hear is coming, it sounds like, well, there was couples sort of this way, but it sounded more like it was coming down.
That's the same room. That's the same room there. You can see the layer.
That's this side of the doors though.
What I found was that even though I can camera track, that's a 3D tracking software, to show that they're in exactly the same spot, but I determined that there was a spike difference in this run through here. It's a binary difference, that's all. It's not scientific, but considering all the chat on that EM meter, I figured there had to be some other proof. It's not foolproof, but it made me think that there was something particular that happened on that night, and this is the way that we went about it. I hope you've enjoyed this afternoon. You take whatever belief and thoughts you have from this presentation, and I'll see you next time.
Black fingernails, red wine, I wanna make you all mine. A lot of people underground, you wanna get there, you gotta go straight down. Whoa, straight down. Whoa, there's a culture everywhere, smoke clouds hang in the air, so loud, can't hear you talk. You and I should take a walk downtown. Whoa, straight down. Whoa, downtown. Whoa, straight down. Arguing over God continues. This hell, I understand the point. Our fingers, the ground. I understand the point. Our fingers, straight down. Red letter day, black heart, it's gonna tear you